plans that you know, here are the options, here's what's possible. Summit Carbon has said from the very beginning, our goal was to seek 100% voluntary easements. On the route that goes north and south in Montgomery County, we crossed 27 landowners. We've signed 20 of them up. We've paid them $4.6 million. We are still in negotiations with the other 7 landowners. That will continue for the next year and a half until we have to start construction. So our goal is to continue to seek voluntary easements. Statewide, we've signed 75% of the landowners up voluntarily. We've signed 1,230 landowners, and we paid them in total $158 million. So what I think you'll see here is if you sit down and visit with our landowners, talk about the questions and concerns you have, people like Kylie and the project engineering team can come out and visit with you about how to route it on your property. We have Dave and the safety team can talk about any of those safety concerns. JD focuses on the agricultural impacts. He's a farmer. So, you know, if we propose the project going through your property in a way that you don't like, talk to us. This is the first time we can even talk to you legally. So I think you'll see that the vast majority of the people that sit down and talk about it can usually get to resolution. And that shows in the numbers that we've done statewide thus far. In this new portion that goes west, or technically from Corning west, we have not been able to talk to any landowners until the conclusion of this meeting. And so our hope now is to begin that conversation, talk about your concerns, talk about the routing. If you're adamantly against the project, we'll look at see if we can move it to a neighbor's property. We've done that, like Kylie said, literally 1,000 times. And what we do have to follow is the rules and regulations. And so one of the rules and regulations that we have to follow is what they call a notice corridor. So we can't move anywhere, like we can't just go wherever we want. We have to stay within the corridor. And that's a rule we have to follow. But like I said, we've signed 75% of the folks up in Montgomery County already, and we hope to do and continue that number and continue that progress.
My name is Becky Bell, and I have land in Montgomery County. I just want a little more education on some of the things you said this morning. So I think, Kylie, you said it's a liquid, 98% pure. If it would rupture and hit the atmosphere, does it stay liquid or does it convert to gas?
It instantaneously becomes gas.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. I wasn't sure. And I also read that as a gas, it's lower than the atmosphere, so it won't create a cloud. It will stay on the ground, correct?
So it's heavier than air,
Right.
but as it comes out in pressure, depending on what type of leak scenario it is, it could go up and then, you know, dissipate. It's dissipating as it goes up. It could come down somewhat. Typically, it wouldn't get back down to the ground. If it's like a full separation of the pipe, that could migrate along the ground, typically in the direction of the wind.
Thank you. I have a couple other questions too, and I don't remember who mentioned training the EMTs and the disaster people. So, at what point of the pipeline? I think you said it happens during construction.
Yeah, so we've already started to meet with emergency managers across the footprint of the project to introduce them to the project and start to learn about capabilities that they have or don't have, and how we can work together to get to a point to where you know, they're comfortable with our project, they have the equipment they need if there was the unlikely event of a release. And we will start, the timeline is we will typically start the actual training in the construction phase, you know, before we would go into operation and put CO2 into there. And the other piece that we do before operation is we do tabletop exercises with those teams to where we have different scenarios of incidents, and we play, you know, like it's a real response, and see if, you know, to verify everybody is ready and we have the right you know, the right equipment and people and things that we need to respond to.
Okay, so with those emergency crews, you know, personnel changes, so
Yes.
will you do annual refreshers? How does that work?
Yeah, so the regulations require us to do an annual, not to exceed 15 months. We have committed to doing about every 6 months, because we understand in rural communities that especially in the volunteers, there's a lot of overturn. And so we've committed to do that as needed, if it needs to be done on a weekend, you know, because some people have other jobs, whether on a weekend or at night or whatever it may be. We have committed to that. And again, that's something we are talking to the emergency managers about, because they coordinate that across the county.
Okay, and will you work with surrounding counties as they may be called in if there was something that happened?
Yeah, so again, we do it all through the emergency manager in the county we're in. And so if they have mutual aid agreements and things like that, then they would bring those in. If they said, hey, we need to get these folks trained as well, because, you know, 8 out of 10 times they come and help us, then we'll definitely train.
So my last question refers to inspections, reports. How often are inspections done, or how do you monitor, you know, the pipeline? And are there reports that are made public? Can we go in and look at something?
I can take this one. There's various types of inspection on the pipeline. The most frequent would be we would fly the pipeline with a plane every 2 weeks approximately. And that is mostly looking to see if someone's gonna maybe start digging by our pipe, things like that, verification. For the integrity management side, we'll have what we call inline inspection tools that run with the system, run with the flow of the pipeline. And that gives us a full diagnostic of the integrity of the system, if we have internal or external corrosion, if we're losing depth of cover, if our cathodic protection systems are not working or are shorted in some ways. We have abilities to go in and check for those things. And those reports are given to PHMSA. My knowledge if PHMSA publicizes them is I don't know.
I think it'd be nice if you could look at a report, just like when we're on city water, we get to see reports on that type of thing too.
If you go into the regulation, there's really defined, if this is the result, this is what you have to do. If you're in this threshold, this is what you have to do in terms of response, but it is actually, so if anything were to fall on that property, the conversation would take place. But if the reports are publicized, I just don't know.
So, and when are shut-offs, how far apart? Or, you know, how you do shut-offs and stuff, how do you do that?
The federal requirement, and this is actually new, as of about a year or two ago, is 20-mile spacing. That's where you start, and then you bring them in for high populated areas, for environmentally sensitive areas, for waterways. So that's the maximum spacing that we start with, and then we bring them in as we do our various surveys and studies of the system.
Thank you.
Hello, it's me again, Paula Cleppinger. Now that I know you can come up to 50 foot, I'm sorry, I'm short, sorry.
There you go.
Even further. Now that I know that you can come up to my house about 50 feet, for my peace of mind, I want to know more about your company. So how many miles of pipeline have you laid? How do we know the safety that you're talking today is enforced? How many miles have you already put down in this type of hazardous pipeline in areas?
Summit Carbon Solutions is a new company, but from our chief operating officer down on the operations teams, the team that our engineers that I fall under, our construction managers have spent their entire career in the pipeline industry, all of them building both under the liquid and the gaseous regulations. We have one person who's previously worked under CO2, but as long as you're familiar with the PHMSA DOT 195 regulations, the construction and operation is the same. And every person on the team came from the pipeline industry.
So you're telling me that you haven't put any of this hazardous waste like in the ground before?
Hazardous liquid pipelines?
Yes, you haven't?
Yes, we've put hazardous liquid pipelines, not Summit Carbon Solutions as a company, but the entire operations team has.
So we can research them to see how well their record is, or?
You could probably look up some of the systems that have been built under our team.
And then I was noticing, like, in the first letters that we had to sign for, they said that you guys would be laying anywhere from a 6-inch to a 24-inch pipeline. And yet in the presentation, it says you're using a 16 to an 18 trencher. That's gonna be hard to put a 24-inch pipe in a 18-inch trench. Are we going bigger or smaller? Or it just decides as you go?
That trench size was specific to Montgomery County.
Okay.
The 24-inch pipe will be up on our main line, up more in northern Iowa, and actually mostly in South Dakota and North Dakota. So that was specific to your guys' county and the size trench that we'll need for that size pipe, for the size pipe that we need to capture the carbon at Poet Corning and bring it into the system.
Thank you.
My name is Terry Lane. We have a farm north of here. I was curious about, to follow up on her 6-inch pipe question, what's the size of the pipe that hooks into running north from Mills County all the way up to Cherokee?
Well, it hooks in Montgomery County, so I guess,
So it's
I don't know if you have the
6
map.
inch that feeds into,
It feeds into a 6-inch that it then increases in size as you head north.
so what size is that pipe? From north to south?
It's 6-inch down south.
This
It-
one, the 6-inch runs through Montgomery.
It starts and then it ties into a 6-inch.
To another 6-inch?
Yes, and then it increases in size as you head north. I believe in Crawford County is where the increase is.
And the mountains. The east to
and-
west one's probably larger.
East to west, it also increases in size. It starts at 8 on the far east side and moves up to 24 before heading into South Dakota.
And what are your operating pressures?
We will operate between 1,300 and 2,100 PSI with a maximum MOAP of 2183.
2183?
Mhm.
That would just be specific to each pipe size, or does that pressure increase per pipe size?
No, the pressure doesn't increase by pipe size. It actually is gonna increase by length that it has to go between either connection points or pump stations.
So we could calculate then ourselves, given relative pressures, that plume, if there was a release or a leak at 2100 PSI. Like, in comparison, my history, I'm a pipe fitter, sheet metal worker, as a design engineer. Actually, I worked at Poet, and was one of our clients for local 3 sheet metal workers. But for a steam generator injection pipe, those pressures are between 3,500 PSI, and that's pushes an enormous generator wheel around. So those pipes get bigger and they condense to smaller and smaller. That would create a significant plume at 2,100 PSI coming out of a 6-inch pipe, or, the larger the amount of volume, if it was a 24-inch pipe, that would be a significant release to say the least. So you could calculate that yourself at home to answer this guy's question of what a kill zone would be or whatever.
I think what the release looks like is first important to the type of release. Was it, if it was struck by an excavator?
Sure,
What
yeah.
took place
Yeah, or a
inside of the
pinhole.
release of the pinhole. And also incredibly important is understanding the jet release style of a pipeline, as well as the dispersion rate that takes place. And then the weather is gonna play a major factor as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, pressures, yeah, humidity and all that. For people that don't know, could you explain the process and then do you do calculations on, you had 1 pound of ethanol equals 3 pounds, whatever, your breakdown. The current terawatt intake of electrical usage on a typical ethanol plant like Poet, and what that increase looks like when you add a compression system to condense that carbon dioxide into a transferable liquid, and the amount and then for, here in Iowa, we apparently get 60% of our electricity from wind or something along those lines, but Nebraska's not that, South Dakota definitely is not that. So the increased total usage on the communities around that you're asking for people to, buy into.
Yeah, exact numbers, I don't know, I'm assuming they're not known within municipal plans. But what we'll do is a full electrical study across the grid to understand capabilities, working with the power companies, and will increase the grid needs as required for the system. So we'll work with the power companies to ensure that the power is available, and where it's not, they'll build out of their systems at the expense of Summit.
Summit will build new substations, will build new generation.
It's gonna depend on the needs of that area as we work with the power companies, but it's
That's
not
in your
a
contracts?
industry.
They're willing to provide that extra electrical generation for the compression?
We haven't had concerns with electrical yet.
Not yet? Or you're not doing it yet?
But we're pretty far along on discussions with the phase one project, not so much in phase two.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name's Adrian Grant, and I live in Stanton. So this pipeline that's going through, does it have a cathodic protection system? So, and if it does, can you explain that, and how much area will that take up for like the anode plate wires?
Yep, we'll have, sacrificial anodes that'll be placed in the ground,
How far away?
from the system, 20, I don't know the exact distance, it's near the system, which is what it's designed for, 10, 15 feet from the pipe.
Okay.
And it's placed vertically in the ground.
My
So
concern
the
is,
footprint on the ground is nearly nothing with the exception of the needed rectifier.
okay, my concern is that you have to be 50 feet away, but then, and we were told it's just a 6-inch pipe with epoxy coating, but there's more to it, there's a protection system. And then that, it's gotta be placed so far away, and then you gotta have so much easement so far away from it.
If for any reason we need to get off the easement that is being acquired, that 50-foot easement, we'll discuss with the landowner for additional space.
Should we anticipate any insurance problems, like with insurance on our farm, with this pipeline going through?
That's a really good question, thank you for asking. So, we get that question almost every stop. So, we indemnify the landowner, so we insure the pipe, and so that in the easement agreements, we indemnify the landowner, so the landowner does not have that risk. And so I think there's over 40,000 miles of pipeline in Iowa. It'd be just the same as how insurance is treated on those 40,000 miles today.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Gollenhorst, and first of all, don't take my picture, because I need to take pictures, because I'm in the Witness Protection Act. So, first of all, my first question is, are you a company or are you a public entity?
Yeah, so Summit Carbon Solutions is a company based out of Ames, Iowa.
Right.
Privately owned.
Privately owned? Okay, thank you. And then, you said that your first out the chute was about profit, better prices for corn and stuff. So I guess I'll go with the greed aspect of it. In the places that you have the carbon capture, how much difference is there in the corn prices than everywhere else? Is there a difference?
So you mean where it's happening today?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's happening today both in Decatur, Illinois. They've been doing this for what, JD, about a decade, I think?
Yeah, and it's actually at the Farm Progress Show, so if you ever go to the Farm Progress Show in Decatur, you're actually standing on a sequestration area.
Okay, so my question is, what are the better prices that they're getting in that area than what everyone else is getting?
So the ethanol, obviously, I think farmers in the room would agree that the ethanol, when it started, 15, 20 years ago, that it has definitely made an increase in our value of our corn. Going forward, what this is going to ensure is one, majority of the plants that are on our line are looking at possibly expanding, which is going to create more demand, more grind for the corn. So with that, more demand, and with our supply right now, there's some argument out there that we have an oversupply. So anything we can do to increase the demand for corn is going to be benefit our farmers. To put an exact dollar amount on it per year is difficult to do.
Right, well, hopefully something in the system has made the prices raise, because comparable to the expenses of putting the corn crop in, our corn is pretty much worth nothing. So heck yes, ethanol, that's what's made our corn worth $3. I'm sure that a lot of farmers will say, that's nothing, they were $3 in the 50s. I don't know.
Well,
Anyway,
I mean, that's just what we're concerned about, right? So we know that the demand side is, the demand for ethanol is stagnant, right? And so we know, I mean, new electric vehicles coming out, so it's all about developing new markets. And so that's why ethanol has said, we need this to stay competitive, because we know that the automobile demand, I mean, like going to E15 is great, we think that's terrific, and hopefully that continues to rise, but it's not going to keep up with the ever-changing market, and so that's why we have to get into the SAF market.
well, I think the profitability, when you say we have to keep it profitable, that's talking about your pocket.
Yeah.
Okay, so, trying to say is that we should, have this deadly gas on our land, that's been owned.
They're gonna get $85 a ton when it goes in the ground, so like, what is Poe gonna get?
Yeah.
How do you not know?
Yeah.
I guess, you're gonna get paid $85 a ton when you put this in the ground in North Dakota, correct? Some is.
So.
A tax credit.
No, so what you're referencing is the 45Z tax credit.
Yes.
And 45Q, which started, it's either or. That started under President George W. Bush, it was increased under President Obama, it was increased under President Trump, and it was increased under President Biden. It's been both parties, it's been decades of work on it, it's not new. And so there are government programs to help support these industries get started. Each of these ethanol plants have different agreements with us on how they're structured. I don't know the specifics of those, but we partner with the ethanol facilities, and then they sell their ethanol on the low carbon fuel market for a premium, and then we split that with them in the most basic sense.
But yet, some of the rules aren't even written, the 45Z rules aren't even written.
Correct, yeah, it starts.
So how did the poet even gonna know, I bought my fertilizer, my nitrogen fertilizer for next year's crop, and I sell a lot of corn to poet, so just how is any of this supposed to know? But you know enough, you're gonna build this pipeline 600 and some miles through Iowa to make money. If you're a private company, you're not doing it because you're not gonna make money.
Right.
So how, I still don't, nobody can answer this question.
So what we do know is that there's a market out there today for low carbon fuel, that people are willing to pay a premium for that low carbon fuel. The states are required, right? And most of the plants in the Midwest, if you look at it on average, the carbon intensity score, or the amount of energy that it takes to make that ethanol, is around 55. So you have to get below 50 to get into the game and be considered low carbon fuel. Now, it's not, the goal isn't to get just to 50 or below.
Where did 50 come from?
It's one of the
Did it come
green
from,
models.
yeah, the
that-
Green New Deal, George Soros or something like that?
No, I think there's
seriously.
there's science behind it, and you can go out there and you can look at the formulas to see what formulas go into it to get to it. So the score is 50, we need to get below, and it's not just to get to 49, we really want to get to 0 because
We won't get to 0.
no, there is a way to do that. So
It's happening, sir, I'm not here to argue with you, but in Brazil, it's happening today.
So how can they get to 0 if they're shipping it up here on a boat to make
Because it's all,
fuel and
all the inputs are, it's a formula, it's called the GREET model, and so in Brazil, for instance, they don't use natural gas at their ethanol plants, they use renewable, I think eucalyptus leaves, I believe, and so they already started a lower score than we do, and so it's sugarcane, not corn ethanol, and so, and they're gonna do direct inject, carbon sequestration as well. And so they're gonna be producing carbon 0 or carbon negative ethanol. And so that's all we're trying to do is keep Iowa ethanol competitive. I mean, I think I don't wanna interrupt. Sorry.
Okay, well, I don't have any section 6542s or whatever that I've memorized so that I can talk to you in your speak. But for years, the companies have been telling the public what's best for them. And I don't know about anybody here, but is anyone a millionaire? Like the people that own this company? Okay, just wondering. You said that we have been in the business for generations on our farm. Okay, so by the Constitution, it should belong to us because we own it. Your experience, I think you said between 2 and 4 years, you've been in this business with this company, and I say company. And another thing that I'm concerned about, not only the hazardous of the gas, how much water does it take for this to make what you're going to ship or whatever? We have an aquifer near Shenandoah, Page County, that obviously the wells did not keep up with the demand just in general household usage this year. If anyone paid attention, I don't believe that they had their pool filled. I believe that they had the water on certain days. I know in our area, we have an aquifer, but what's the level of that? So what is the percentage of the gallons that you use to make this move?
So at the ethanol plant, we'll use water in the cooling process during compression. This will be in the same closed loop system that the ethanol plants currently use water today. We'll increase their water usage to a maximum of 9%. When you account for it for the state of Iowa, ethanol accounts for 1% of the total water usage in the state of Iowa. Right now.
Yeah.
And when our system comes online, and I ran very conservative numbers, it will increase it to 1.1% of the water usage in the state of Iowa.
Well, on a small level, that's not very much, but on a large level, that's a lot. So my question is, why are we letting our people or our companies tell us what's good for our air, what's good for our water, when all the hidden things that there are don't make sense? So let it be known that I'm not against energy. I wish I had some myself. But I don't want a pipeline on my land, and I don't want to look out my window at night and see red flashing lights. There are other ways to get energy than those two, and it doesn't correct our
Hi, my name's Sam Rachel. I'm sure you guys probably know me. Have you guys entered into any agreements with any contractors yet to build this pipeline? Any signed contracts?
No.
No signed contracts, okay. Can you guys ensure that all of your contractors are gonna hire at least 50% of the workforce from local economies that you guys are going through?
In the state of Iowa, we're planning to use majority union contractors. We also, when we're in construction, we have a lot of things like dust control and fencing that we hire local.
Majority of 6 out of 10 could be majority. Talking 9 out of 10?
I can't speak to how the unions are gonna pull their contractors, but logically, they probably will pull from the Iowa unions.
Well, I'm sure you guys know, Precision, Michaels, TG Mercer, Piedmont, Rockford, and many others are required to hire 50% of Iowa workers to work this project. People like Pumco that are coming out of Texas, people out of Oklahoma and other states, they're not required to hire 50% of local workers. So, to me, in essence, we're gonna have Iowans sitting at home, not feeding their families, while we got people up here from Texas doing our work.
It is very likely that Precision Associated in Rockford will all be building in the state of Iowa.
What was that?
Will all be building in the state of Iowa.
What about Pumco?
I can't say that definitively that they won't, but we're more likely to use the Precision leg.
Okay. Is Summit entered into any community agreements that ensures the project's built by the safest and best trained workforce in the industry, and also benefits landowners and the communities like other companies are currently doing here in the Midwest?
I guess we continue to work at the county level with the first responders, with the elected officials. as well as various pipeline safety agencies to ensure we're building the safest pipeline possible. That's what you're asking.
Okay, thank you.
Jan Norris again. There are only 5,000 miles of operational CO2 pipelines in the US currently. And you said you don't know the data, but somebody else does. Research shows that 102 leaks have been voluntarily reported in the last 20 years by CO2 operational pipelines. That's 102. That's a lot more than 3. At least 1 dozen of these leaks have been with Kinder Morgan when the COO of Summit, Jimmy Powell, was their vice president. I think it's a little disingenuous of you to say otherwise. So how can you say with a straight face that it is not the CO2 that injured people in Satartia? The hospital reports don't reflect that the hydrogen sulfide injured them. The investigation doesn't support those claims. So please, let's tell the truth about what injured people in Mississippi. It was the CO2, and it could injure us here in Iowa as well also.
I guess to respond, I was asked for notable ruptures of CO2.
No, I think it was asked how many ruptures.
Most reportable incidents, especially when we're talking about liquid versus gas, where the reportable levels are a contractor working at a site and a small amount is released during standard repair, and that is reportable to the government, and those where those numbers come from. So it's common to have a small amount released during a repair, as common in any other pipeline, as standard repairs are done.
But these were reported.
I forgot the sorry.
All right, I don't think that that's what we're talking about. We were talking about releases that can hurt us, like a rupture after a 7-inch rain, because we get 7-inch rains now. And we, the public, and here 150 of us, want to feel like we're a little safer than that. So that's why we're asking to have setback ordinances put in place locally to protect us a little better. We need a buffer between our homes and the pipeline if you're the only one choosing how close it goes to our house.
I guess when there is abnormal weather conditions, there are regulations that must be followed on how we, as a pipeline operating company, respond. If that means derating the system or fully shutting it off until full inspection can be complete, then you can find that all within the federal regulation. And then I do believe you asked in Satartia, there were no incidents reported related to hydrogen sulfide. Well, the PHMSA reported there were no incidents reported, injuries reported for CO2. There were no injuries reported that day at all.
Gerald Palm, Scott Township. Back to the question of the water that I was going to bring up. If I understand correctly, we're looking at 3.5 to 4 billion gallons of water per year. Is that correct? And then I guess the thought there, the second part of the question would be, what are you going to do when you run out? Or what's everyone else going to do when they run out for a project like this?
I do not know the numbers, but all of our water will be permitted and regulated by the DNR, the IDNR, and they look at water impacts and water availability as they release available permits.
Joey Reese from Griswold, Iowa. The pipeline doesn't go through my land, but I'm deeply concerned about this because I'm concerned about the health of all of us. And to follow up on the water question, which is what I wanted to talk about. So Kylie, you were talking about the water usage for just the ethanol, and can you speak to that per gallon? What is used?
Per gallon, I'm unsure. I just know that we will need about an 8 to 9% increase depending on the size of each ethanol plant. So the percent will stay the same.
So have you received the water permit from the DNR for this project?
We have not gone for water permits.
And let me just tell you what I know about water usage. So, ethanol requires 3 gallons of water per gallon of ethanol to move. For CO2, it's an additional 1.05 gallons of water, which, to your point earlier, you said we would only have an increase of 0.1%. IUC uses 1% for ethanol, and you said the CO2 pipeline was only, what, a tenth more?
Yeah,
Okay, so that doesn't really add up. That's actually 33%.
I'm unsure where those numbers
Okay.
are coming from, so I apologize, but the numbers we have are that it will increase 8 to 9% at each ethanol plant based on the size of the plant.
So, and you don't have your water permit? Okay, so to the people, this is another way to stop this pipeline by going to the DNR and not allowing the permit for the water. I have a lot more to say about this, but we are actually, you are all drinking water. We are 70% water in our bodies. Where does the water come from? We get it from the bedrock aquifers, which are recharged over thousands of years. This doesn't affect me directly because there's not going to be a pipeline in my land, but it affects me. It affects my health, our health, because of the least of us. Thanks.
Anna Ryan again, and when I stood in line, I was just going to make a simple request of Summit, but some of the answers that have been given since I've been standing in line have made me realize that I also, once again, just like I did last night, I'm going to have to call you out for making less than truthful statements to the public in this room. The PHMSA report about Satartia said there were no injuries because in order for an injury to be reported under PHMSA's regulations, someone has to be admitted to the hospital. Now, I don't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere around 45 people, and I know one of you even mentioned this last night, were taken to the hospital after that incident in Satartia. They simply were not admitted. So the report makes it look like there were 0 injuries. There were actually a number of people who needed medical treatment, some of whom are still seeking ongoing medical care for the injuries they suffered that day. That leads directly into the request that I was going to ask of you, which is that I have heard several times, several PHMSA documents referenced as you've explained these issues to the people in this room. And my request was simply going to be that I know PHMSA's website is not particularly easy to navigate if you're not involved in the industry. So my request was going to be, after this meeting, can you go back and upload to the docket a copy of all of the documents that you have mentioned so that members of the public can have access to that and see what they actually say. Now, ones that I've heard so far mentioned are the PHMSA study relating to the Satartia rupture, the PHMSA study that advocates shelter in place as a viable safety option, the bulletin regarding lateral migration and other analyses, and several times PHMSA's safety regulations. So I would request that you upload all of those documents so the public can access them easily and read them, and additionally any other public documents, particularly those issued by PHMSA that you mentioned for the duration of the public hearing. Also, I believe I saw Mr. Leonard in the back, so if this would be an appropriate time, I would be interested in getting an answer to my earlier question.
You need to repeat it for him?
Brant, if you could come up for a question.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question, yeah. And if an answer to this needs to be submitted in writing after the meeting, I'm fine with that as well. I noticed the name of the company seeking the permit in docket HLP 2021-0001 was Summit Carbon Solutions LLC. The name of the company seeking the permit in this docket is SCS Carbon Transport LLC. So my question is, what is the relationship between those two companies, and what are the implications of the company to respond financially if there is an incident in Adams or Montgomery County, given the use of multiple limited liability companies?
So the short answer is, as you know, I'm not in-house corporate counsel at Summit, so I don't know exactly outside counsel.
Raise the mic.
Just turn it on.
Use one of the little ones.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think so.
The short answer is I can't answer your question off the top of my head about the LLCs. I'm not inside corporate counsel. I'm outside counsel. But we can put that in writing, of course.
I would appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm James Norris again, asking a few questions here quickly. First, I'm going to make a statement that, in my humble opinion, this looks like a multi-billion-dollar taxpayer-funded boondoggle. This is not the savior for ethanol, because a nice neighbor of mine just asked you a question if it was doing, prices were better where you were using this, and they weren't. Water, we know it's looking at billions more gallons of water usage out of our deep rock aquifers. And eminent domain should never be used for a private company. But my questions, again, are a little bit more on the safety issue. I'll start with you, Dave. You mentioned earlier that, you guys cannot release to us the plume modeling, which is the dispersion modeling, because of terrorists, could possibly use this or something like that. We've talked about Satartia enough, but Satartia was a mile away. And I think everybody's heard enough about Satartia, so I won't go into all that. But it was a mile away. Don't you think that people like my neighbor that's 288 feet from this pipeline, that don't get $1 for this, because it's right over their property line, have the right to know those types of things? What do you think, Dave?
As I mentioned before, and I don't think I ever mentioned terrorists, I said it's potentially security sensitive information that has been argued and debated by the IUC and the Public Service Commission and have issued a confidentiality order, and we are following that.
Okay. And in your presentation, you said the CO2 is used as a fire suppressant. Do you want to explain to people why it's used as how it works as a fire suppressant?
I don't think I ever said anything about
In your presentation, it says it's in your presentation that was on the screen there, maybe not yours, but in the Summit presentation, it says it's used as a fire suppressant. I'll answer it for you if you want, because it displaces oxygen. That's why, right? Okay. Do you know what they use to kill rats in a lot of the sewer systems in the bigger cities?
No.
CO2. Do you know what they use at some of the animal processing plants to euthanize animals? CO2. Okay. The IUB, one of the rulings that you guys had in this deal was that Summit had to provide CO2 detectors to, I believe, all the local first responders. Is that correct, Dave?
CO2 monitoring.
Monitors, okay, thank you, monitors. And you mentioned again shelter in place if something like this happens. So let's be clear what the CO2 monitors for our first responders are. That is so that they don't drive into it, right, accidentally. So they set up a perimeter, what's known as the kill zone, and wait till it's clear enough to go in and recover the living and or the dead. Is that correct?
No, they use the monitors to monitor the air as they approach. So they understand what the risk is.
So they don't take the risk, right? So they don't know the current risk. Okay, thank you, it's good enough. Is that part of then, this whole plan, part of your good neighbor policy? Because you guys talk about a good neighbor policy. That sounds fair enough? Okay. Kylie, we'll move on to you. Kylie, PHMSAs we've talked about before, of people that regulate pipelines, and we know that they are coming out with new regulations on CO2 pipelines because of the unique danger they provide. Currently, as we've talked, the setback is 50 feet, and it could be closer than that if you dig down another 12 inches. I don't think that's set too well with a lot of the people here that it could be as close as 50 feet to the house. So, would Summit, why not wait until PHMSA comes out and sets the new regulations? What do you think about that?
My understanding is the regulations are coming out this fall, which is little before we'll be building the pipeline.
Okay. So you're saying if my neighbor is 288 feet from the current pipeline route, and PHMSA comes out and says you probably ought to be a little further than that, like maybe 1,000, you would change the route?
We will follow all PHMSA regulation.
So you would change the route at that time, if that was the case?
If that's what federal regulation says.
Okay, that's part of your good neighbor policy, I guess, too. Okay. And Jake, you're up next, I guess. County ordinances. We know that many counties, several counties have passed ordinances, And you guys have either sued them or threatened to sue them for doing that because it put a dent in your business plan. So right now, I know there's some of our county supervisors here in the meeting, and I know they're scared of this. Rightfully or wrongfully, they're scared of this. So this is really easy question for you, Jake, right here in front of everybody. Will you tell them if you pass an ordinance, we'll sue you, or if you pass an ordinance, we won't? It's pretty simple.
I guess I can talk about the county ordinances. I do a lot of work at the county
Okay.
level. I think it's important to understand when you're building a multi-state project that everyone is working on the same legal playing field, where authority lies. And when there's a dispute for that, that's what the court system is designed for, which we went to court. We went to a federal court with Judge Rose in the Southern District, who ruled that the ordinance that was in place was not lawful. It has been sent now to the district, a higher level court.
Okay.
So it's important to use the court systems to understand where regulation lies and where preemption is already existing.
So if our county supervisors thought that 50 feet might be a little close and wanted to put it 1,000, you're saying that's worth suing them over.
I'd be happy to talk to your county supervisors as I have multiple.
So I'll take that as a no, I guess, that's a no. And I guess that's part of your good neighbor policy. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Janet Cake. We have ground South Stanton.
Closer, Janet.
I'm Janet Cake, South Stanton, and we have land in your proposed area. So I might have missed it because I couldn't quite see all of the slides, but I didn't see you state how wide the permanent easement is and the temporary easement. I heard you talk about 18 inches is all you need for the pipe to go into, but I didn't hear how much the easements were. And I could follow that up with how wide does it have to be for you to get all your heavy equipment in there?
Yeah, so the permanent easement will be 50 foot wide. The temporary construction will be 100 foot in total, so an additional 50 foot. A lot of that is gonna be used for soil storage. As I mentioned, we will separate the topsoil and put it off to one side. That won't be disturbed. And then we also do need to run the equipment in the easement. And then the reason we have a 50-foot easement following construction is if we ever have to come back out and do repairs, we'll stay in that 50-foot.
So what type of equipment are you using to put this pipe in? A lot of us here have drain tile, and in our minds we think, oh, well, they just kind of slice right through the ground, but we're talking about a totally different situation here, correct?
Then the installation of a drain tile.
Well, you don't usually need the heavy caterpillars and all these heavy equipments that are gonna be compacting the ground soil is what I'm getting at, because those will be brought in, correct?
There will be equipment, very little that will be, the equipment itself will not be over any legal limits just because the pipe size is small, so the equipment will be smaller than, say, if we were laying like a 48-inch pipeline.
Well, I understand that, but I'm just saying, it's heavier equipment than a farmer would probably use, correct?
I would say no. I'll let JD, who's a farmer, knows more.
Yeah, as we know, equipment's gotten big over the last 20 years. The other thing you have to remember is that's on tracks. Majority of that stuff's on tracks, so the compaction per square inch is probably less than a wheel tractor could be.
So if your pipeline goes through the middle of a section, what type of easement do you have to come up with to get to it? You just go through, if there's some type of maintenance that needs to be done on the pipe, then I presume you have to go across the existing crops to get through it to do your maintenance or repairs, correct?
And we would pay for that crop damage for those years.
Somebody was talking about the liability insurance. I don't know if anybody's checked, but the people I've talked to will not give us liability insurance because it's toxic waste / pollutant running through our ground. And I believe you had stated that you would indemnify us against damage to the pipe, but where does the liability exposure, how is that covered with whether it's livestock or people or who knows what?
Good question. So that's on us as a company to have insurance. And so in the Iowa Utility Commission rule on the phase 1 permit, that was a condition. They said Summit must have X, I think it was $100 million worth of insurance. And so I just want to reiterate, this is not new. And so there are thousands of miles of pipelines with hazardous liquid material, you know, and those farmers have insurance today. So it's kind of a myth that's out there.
Well, there's about 3 million of natural gas pipeline, as I understand it, and there's 5,000 miles of CO2 pipeline in the south. Which have,
North Dakota, Illinois, Texas, Louisiana.
but around 5,000 miles, correct? That's the,
yeah.
that's the experience level. So when you're talking about 102 events, that's a pretty high percentage versus natural gas having over 3 million miles and a much smaller plume area and less PSI, as I understand it. Is that accurate?
They would have a lot more than 103 incidents. That's Dave's.
I don't know, if there's 103 incidents, like Kylie mentioned, you know, we have to report as a pipeline operator, if we're doing maintenance and we release a little bit of CO2 on our facility, that gets recorded. I looked at PHMSA's data this morning, regarding CO2, reportable releases, you know, that cause an injury or of a greater quantity of a release. And as I mentioned, there's 2, and that's because, and we know there's 3, but one hasn't been uploaded into the system yet because it lags at 2 years.
Sure, okay. So I don't know if anybody that's considering this has talked to a real estate appraiser on the value of your farm ground. One appraiser predicts it could decrease the value of your farm ground as much as 25% on a resale market. And they also said acreage is close by to any potential plume areas as much as 50%. So that, now granted, I haven't interviewed a dozen of them and taken an average, but that's what I'm hearing. So when an easement is for life or perpetuity, that's a pretty big deal, and it sounds like it is an asset that can be sold or bought or used. If your company decides to go on and do something different or doesn't make it, that easement is still there. Correct.
I can answer the land value part of that, is that earlier this year, up in Northwest Iowa, there's 80 acres that sold, record price, set a record in that county. Our easement goes through that property, had already been signed, so the new owner is buying that ground knowing that easement had been signed. And on that same farm, we parallel the Dakota Access Pipeline. So that new owner bought that farm knowing that Dakota Access is there and our easement was signed.
Mm-hmm. So,
And set a record price.
good for him, you know.
Yeah, and then as well, there's several other farms that have sold, and our easements have been signed on those.
I was just talking to somebody here in Southwest
Yeah,
Iowa, so.
and per CSR point, those farms are selling at or higher than what farms without our easement on them sold.
One last question. I know somebody personally who's talked to one of your land agents on the phase 1. They were told, after supposedly negotiation, if they didn't sign the easement, it would go to eminent domain and they would get nothing, which is very threatening and blackmailing, and which is inaccurate, because there is an eminent domain process in place. And if this were to proceed, there would be a value assigned to people who do not sign an easement. So, thank you.
I'm happy to say, if anybody has that experience here today, give me a call personally, and we'll take.
Well, it's a little late. I mean, we're trying to talk about the integrity of the people that you send out, and now there are gonna be surveyors coming out, and there's horrible stories about how they've treated other people. And I realize in an office, you're gonna try to prevent that, but this is happening. Your words are great, but if we're gonna look at actions versus words, we're probably better go by the actions. So it isn't all lining up. But thank you.
Well, I just would clarify, I think, we're dealing with thousands of landowners, and has there been mistakes made? Absolutely. But those have been addressed where they've been made, and I can tell you that threatening eminent domain is not something that's acceptable with our company, and if that does happen, those land agents are terminated.
Cindy Crudoff from Crawford County. A couple things I want to follow up on. First of all, the liability. I am an impacted landowner in Crawford, and I went to my insurance agent, Farmers Mutual, and we will not be covered for liability. I went to my lawyer, And I've said, you know, exactly what Summit is gonna put in their easements as far as indemnity. And he said, sure, Summit will cover the first part, but don't you think Summit's insurance agency is gonna come back on anyone that they can to get their money back? Just like in a car accident, just like any kind of insurance. They said, just be very, very careful. Talk to your lawyer, talk to your insurance company before you sign. Also, as far as the liability with the IUB, you have $100 million in the permit, or the ruling so far. Our easements say that they are forever, eternity, as long as the earth is there. So is that 100 million going to go up exponentially every 5 years? Because $1 million now, excuse me, is probably not what it's gonna be like in 100 years. Has that been addressed?
So in the Summit HLP 21-1 ruling, the commission set the amount at 100 million that they have to maintain for the pipeline. The permit will potentially could be issued for up to 25 years, and then it could seek renewal. And during that time, the commission could examine to see if 100 million is still adequate, or during that procedure process, you know, could be adjusted. I would note that this is a different project. If the commission determines based off evidence presented to it that additional insurance needs to be held for this project, it could order it as part of this project as well.
So after 25 years, they'll relook into everything that was in.
So for that docket, which is different.
This is docket number one.
Number one, yep.
Yes.
So they have that $100 million that they maintain for the life of the project, and after 25 years, we can look at it during the renewal process. But for this docket, HLP 24-6.
We haven't been determined.
Well, we haven't determined it, but the commission could impose another condition requiring additional insurance for just this portion, the 31 miles or whatever this lateral is.
Gotcha, thank you. And then the question is, why forever easements? Wind turbines, solar farms, you're talking 25, 50 years. Why does this pipeline think it needs to be forever, that our great grandchildren are gonna have it on their land? And great.
Wind turbines and solar, there's a life expectancy of the equipment. When it comes to a pipeline, assuming good integrity management systems, it can last. There is no end date that a pipeline can last. Pipelines put in the 1950s and 1960s are still running today. So it's just a little bit different than infrastructure that has a specific lifespan.
You couldn't just go for 200 years, you have to go for eternity.
I'll add.
Just one, I mean, you know, it's ridiculous.
I don't know the exact specifics, but I know that there is state law regarding pipeline abandonment, and there's requirements that the company would have to, I mean, it's all hypothetical, right? But there's rules and regulations in place that if a company ceases operations, I believe that the landowner then has a choice if they want the pipe removed. My understanding from just conversations I've had is that a lot of times landowners just want it, I believe it's filled with some sort of
Leave it in place.
leave it in place. So
Yeah,
it just
disturb the
varies.
land once again.
Yeah.
Right, and then,
The easement is still there.
yes, the easement's
So,
still there, whether they could sell it and sell
So-
it again.
I don't want people from the audience shouting out, but I'll address the question, okay? So under what Mr. Kestner was talking about, if a pipeline is abandoned for more than 5 years, you can request to have it removed and then the easement's terminated.
For 5 years.
So it has to be abandoned for a 5-year period, and then the landowner can request to be taken out, and then the easement reverts back to the landowner.
But it's kind of like Navigator, when Navigator ended theirs, Summit has bought their easements, I'm understanding. So your easement is on your land forever. And the last question I have is about the plume modeling and dispersion. This is a really sensitive subject for me because I'm very concerned about safety. We have asked and asked and asked, and we get the whole, your terrorists, security, all of these things. But now I've come to find out in Crawford County, Summit has met with their supervisors and first responders, shown them the dispersion modeling and the risk analysis. I want to know if they signed NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. Why are they so much more safe than the landowners who are impacted by this? And I've asked to be included, and I was told no. landowners are not to see the plume modeling. So, did they sign an NDA?
No, when I gave the dispersion presentations in Crawford County, they did not sign NDAs.
Okay, just to let you guys know, I mean, that's ridiculous that, and then at a safety meeting in Denison, I'm not sure when it was along the way sometime, I asked when the landowners are going to get to see the dispersion modeling, their risk analysis. We've seen it from Navigator, so we kind of know what it should be like, but I just would like Summit to confirm it. And I was told, never. However, we'll train you on what to do with an incident. So just, keep that in mind as you're thinking through whether or not I should sign an easement with Summit. Thank you.
Paula Kloppinger again. We've been talking about the safety of the humans. How about the animals? We, on our farm, where you're coming down through the middle of it, we have a cow-calf operation. And we have wells that also get to the cattle. What happens when that's interrupted by the pipeline? How about the terraces and the tiling? What happens there when they interrupt all that?
So a lot of that's just in the ag impact mitigation plan that we filed. It gives very specific repairs for the tile and terraces, and if your cattle, they need water, we'll work with you to make sure that they aren't cut off from water.
Because if an interruption from the water to the well is impacted, do we advise the cattle, hold off there a minute, we'll get you some water in a month or two? Do they?
Explain to me how we interrupt the well.
Okay.
Can you explain to me? I'm
Well,
not sure.
there's water lines that run to the waters for the cattle.
So
if those are impacted, if you can come that close to my house, you can also go through my Martin buildings that house my machinery, you can go through my barn, you can go through my water well, interrupt all my watering capacity for the cattle. How do we keep that intact?
Yeah, so you guys
Are
probably
we
explain
protected
the
there?
actual construction, but we'll go underneath those water lines.
Okay. Go underneath the water line. What is the frost line in Southwest Iowa? Do you go deeper for those, or?
For the what?
The frost line, you have to go deeper than those, right? So you have to go deeper than the tile lines, or will you rip through those as well, or?
We will be deeper than the tile lines.
Okay.
We'll be 1 foot deeper at a minimum than the tile lines today.
Okay, and the wells, here's the well, there's the line going through. You'll take that into consideration and not go through the well for the
Yeah,
water?
it'll be a conversation we'll have with the landowners and land agents will have on where the wells are in the property.
Because we were talking about euthanizing animals with CO2, so if there's a rupture, we'll also advise the cattle shelter in place. They're commonly safe. I think that doesn't sound, so people laugh, but that isn't funny, it's our livelihood. If we lose 125 head of cattle, we're up.
Right, and so.
Game over.
So some carbons, like, as I mentioned, so just like crop damages are covered by law, so we're, like, damages like that, it's covered, but the company is liable for an incident like that.
And who determines how much damage or somebody's reimbursed by?
So there's a process in place, I don't know the exact details, but for instance, the Dakota Access Pipeline went through some years ago, I believe. And my understanding is they're still working on cleaning up that. And so there's damages that occur when you build large infrastructure projects. There's processes in place on how you deal with those. I'm not exactly familiar exactly how they work, but I know that there are processes in place to deal with that.
My last question to you folks, all of you, sitting up front here. Would you build a house 50 foot from your hazardous pipeline?
So I can tell you for a fact that I've been working for this company for over 3 years. As I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, I'm not a lifelong island, but I've been in Iowa for a long time. I have been in almost every meeting that we have as a company. Most important thing that we talk about is safety. We have folks on the Dave's team, that's all they do on the team is safety. We have a control center that's monitored 24/7 once you're in operation. We have folks that their only job is to go out and meet with emergency responders. So I can tell you that from my perspective, as someone that's watched this for 3 years, I do not have concerns about safety. It is the job of our company to mitigate risk. And there's risk in everything we do. There's risk in farming, there's risk at the ethanol facilities, there's risk driving here, there's risk driving home. Everything, there's risk in everything. Our job is to mitigate that risk and run, so you engineer, construct, and then operate a pipeline as safely as possible. And the data shows that pipelines are the safest mode of transportation for these products, especially compared to rail or truck. So I can tell you, Summit Agricultural Group, who has, is one of our parent companies, they have easements on Summit Agricultural ground. We want to work with the landowner to site the project. Like I said, 75% of the folks in this county, we worked with them already on a mutually agreeable pathway on their ground. And so that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do every single day.
But I even have concrete on my property that heaves and hoes as it freezes and thaws, and it has the required footings and everything, but that doesn't, compensate for an extra cold winter or more rain than normal. And so isn't the pipeline liable to do the same thing too and can rupture at any given moment?
Steel is less susceptible to freeze thaw than concrete.
Okay.
But in the same way, when we build a pipeline in North Dakota and in Alaska, that 3-foot depth of cover has been deemed sufficient from PHMSA. We've also done our own freeze analysis across the system.
Okay. You also talked about having shutoffs every so often, but with the pressure of this pipeline going through, all of a sudden you shut that off. Isn't the pressure going to build someplace else, causing another hazardous down the line somewhere or up the line?
As the system shuts off, it works in unison. We will flip a switch at the ethanol plant and they'll go back to emitting the atmosphere. We will not be pumping into a system that has a closed valve.
And so how long does that process take, to a rupture, to contacting emergency, to having someone come out and actually be able to start that process?
Yeah, so at every one of our valve sites, as well as at the capture equipment, or capture facility, which is the ethanol plant, we'll have pressure and temperature indicators. Those will read to a control room. That control room has the ability to shut off the system and close the valves remotely, just through their computer.
Unless
So it
they're
doesn't take
frozen
it-
by an ice storm or something like that happens in Iowa every now and again.
Obviously, there's a concern for freeze. We have regulation on cycling the valves, and if we need to, we'll look and get valves closed.
We were without electricity for 2 weeks the last time we had an ice storm, and they, couldn't do much about it. But yet, we're gonna be able to shut down a pipeline before 3 miles of people are killed.
Again, during abnormal weather conditions, that we'll do additional due diligence on the system as required by the regulation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Bill Honeyman. The gentleman from the IUC might have answered this, but not if Summit Carbon Solutions builds the pipe and then abandons the pipe. I know that clause goes back. What if an ethanol plant fails? So like, for example, if Brooks, for some unforeseen reason, closes, what happens to that pipe?
I guess that would be from the same category of the pipe would be abandoned and the 5-year clock would start.
Thank you. So you're pumping from a bunch of ethanol plants across Iowa and you're putting it in wells, I think class 6 wells, is that what they're called, in North Dakota. What's the lifespan of those wells? And what happens to them? I guess a follow-up question, do they get full? What happens, what does the CO2 do underground, a mile under the earth? Because I've never been that far down in the dirt before. And then if they get full, what are you gonna do then?
Yep, so the wellhead itself has a lifespan of 25 years, and at that point we'd have to drill a new wellhead. In terms of capacity of North Dakota, if we were to sequester full capacity for 100 years, we would use 1% of the storage space in North Dakota.
And I would just add, so we have multiple, we have multiple injection sites. And so we're going through that permitting process now. We also have one that's been we partnered with another facility, it's energy, I think it's a coal-fired plant up in North Dakota. They have one that they've already permitted, and so we partnered with them on that one as well. So there's ample space for the injection area in North Dakota. And then over time, I'm not the engineer on the team, but over time, that CO2 basically turns into a rock.
Over a long duration of time, it would calcify underground.
I just have a few unrelated questions to each other here. So if there is a leak, where does Summit help come from to take care of the break? Where's our nearest help?
Yeah, so we will be staffed at the ethanol plants, so that's one location, manning the capture equipment.
You'll have construction crews or?
It'll be, at this point, it'll be Summit Carbon Solutions staff, but they'll all be trained in emergency response. And then we also will have what are pipeline operators across the system, and their day-to-day work is just to check the system. If someone puts in a one call, right, they go out and clear that one call or work with the landowner. They'll also be trained in emergency response, so they will live and work in the area day to day, and then will, as needed, turn into emergency in unforeseen situations, turn into emergency responders.
So how far do you go under creeks, rivers, whatever, how deep under?
Yeah, that's gonna depend on those lateral migration studies and scour analysis that I discussed earlier, as well as geotech investigations to understand the competency of the soils. It's also gonna depend on the size of that river, but we're usually about a minimum of 15 feet under the lowest point of the water.
Okay. And kind of a sidebar, I've heard you mention several times, tile in Iowa is like 3 foot under. My husband does tiling, field tiling, and he's normally laying, 4.5, maybe even 5 feet. He says, it might be 3 foot on these nice flat places, but you look around here, we don't have a whole lot of flat. So, just a note. Last night, you talked about, there's 2 plants that are turning CO2 into something, right? As their plants, one was Decatur and one was something else.
They're actually sequestering it on site. They're in the right geologic formation to do it. So
Okay.
they don't have to pipe it.
So they can put it right in the ground, and that's Decatur and where?
There's I believe it's Red Trail Energy in Blue Flint in North Dakota, as well as ADM in Decatur.
Okay. And I guess the last thing is just a comment. I'm looking at this piece of paper, and here we've got this company that wants to make money. That's the American way, let's make some money. I'm putting the blame on the utilities board, because right in here, it says it should be a public purpose, and this is not a public purpose. This is a private company trying to make money.
Hi, I'm Barb Nelson. I just have a couple of things that I'm concerned about. I want to reiterate again that I am incredulous that you just won't put stuff on pause and wait for the PHMSA safety regulations to come out. I'm just registering my concern about that. Because I haven't really gotten, we'll do what they say. Well, they may say, go ahead and leave it where it is. I want you to wait. Another thing that I'm concerned about my neighbors who will be in negotiations is I'm concerned that now eminent domain has been approved for phase 1. What leg do they have to stand on when it comes to negotiations? Another concern I have is, I don't think anyone has said what happens when water comes in contact with that released CO2. And from the pictures and from what I've read, it's like dry ice, and that is dead land after that. Now, I also am concerned about saying it's going to be 4 feet deep, and we have a lot of land that 4 feet. Today I can take you down the road where my husband's farm, and I would say we've been there 100 years, but not me personally, they used to be able to drive from that field right out onto the road. And it's probably 7 or 8 feet now high because of erosion. And things changed. My last comment and question is, we have someone here from the Office of Consumer Advocate. I would like to hear from him or from someone, what does he do? What does the Office of Consumer Advocate do, and how can they help us?
Just really quick on the 4 feet depth. That's minimum 4 feet depth.
Correct. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tim Tessier. I'm utility administrator at the Office of Consumer Advocate. We, like you, are here monitoring this. If you've watched, I've been sitting here taking notes, listening to all the concerns that will be taken back. We monitor all the cases before the Iowa Utilities Commission, so we will be actively monitoring this to make sure that everybody is represented in the case. That's where we are limited. We don't get that actively involved in the case or relative to the project, but we are monitoring to make sure the consumers are protected.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Got some more questions. So, after a 5-year abandonment period for the Iowa Utility Commission, when Summit loses their funding like Navigator did, due to all our opposition, hopefully, that who then pays to remove what pipe they have in the ground? Who is paying for that? The county, the state, the individual landowner?
So you're talking hypothetical or SCS Carbon or Summit?
Well, all these things come to an end eventually. That's why there's permitting in certain timelines.
They're required to have a $250,000 bond or property in that amount in the state of Iowa under Iowa law.
And then that bond then hires a private contractor?
It could be, that money could be used for those resources if necessary.
So in the case of Keystone XL that failed in Nebraska due to resistance there, they are now just from 2009 removing that pipe in North Dakota. So that was, whatever, 20 years ago, almost. So those landowners up there have just had a product where they've been unable to use their land for almost 2 decades now, fighting because a company, no offense to you, I know everybody needs a job, but when the company failed, it was then, long story short, even with the bonds litigated in court, it falls to the landowner. You know, when somebody puts something on your land, like the lady was saying, it's your grandchildren or your great-great-grandchildren that are gonna be dealing with this, right? That's how it is. $250,000 bond is your answer?
Yes.
Okay, so.
I want to just clarify something. I mean, there's literally 40,000 miles of pipe.
I understand. I was a pipe fitter.
So it's the rules and regulations, like it's not just a Summit rule and regulations,
Sure.
It's how any oil, natural gas, I mean, it's not new. I just want to clarify, it's not specific.
I understand, we've had bad ideas for a long time. We're trying to learn from those bad ideas and move forward and not make the same mistakes that got us into the situation we're in right now. It's a need to sequester carbon, so in the first place. So we are in this situation due to generations of poor ideas that have led us to say that ethanol is a greener fuel when you only measure burning ethanol next to burning diesel. Sure, it has less CO2 effect, but if you calculate all the inputs involved in creating ethanol, you might as well burn crude oil for an overall. If you're taking in the nitrogen, the fertilizer to raise the corn, please. The overall, the electricity involved to condense and create ethanol and turn it into a fuel, as opposed to using sweet crude and refine it a little bit, turn it into diesel fuel. Are you gonna argue that? Please do.
I would respectfully have a different opinion on ethanol and ethanol's impact on the state of Iowa. If we lose 53% of our demand for corn, that's very concerning. Just take away the Summit portion, take out some Iowa. I would be petrified for our state economy if we lose half the demand. JD knows much more about the ethanol industry than me, but that's the why. We want to make ethanol, we want to help keep ethanol competitive.
Right, so that we have those monies traveling into corporations that then own co-ops that then hire us out as indentured servants to create more of their product for them, as opposed to my grandparents that raised food in communities and then traded and shared those goods and were somehow able to survive. And I'm standing here from it. It's just two different ways of wanting a future for your children. But back to the depressurization on a pipe that I believe this lady tried to ask, what is your response time? I understand someone has not built any pipelines, so they probably don't have any testing to show. But if there is a release, if I on my land hit it with a backhoe, knock that 6-inch pipe in half, which I have to admit I have done. I've hit some stuff, and people hit stuff because it's hard to remember where it's at. Whatever. How long does it take? How many seconds? Because you're talking about seconds before that is a cloud, you know.
Yeah, first, I would say, please call 811 before you dig.
Right.
Second, the feedback back to our control room, is nearly instantaneous. And if we start to lose that extreme threshold, do you have the capability to take out, the decision maker and have the system shut itself down? If we, depressurize, we start to.
What percentage of loss before it becomes automated out of a manual control situation?
I think we're still determining it, and it's based off some of the new regulations that have been implemented out here. But there'll be a threshold, and once the valve starts closing on a 6-inch pipe, it takes about 25 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds at 2,100 PSI from 6-inch volume. That's a calculation you can make for your properties on how big that cloud would be.
Say that again. I think we can't hear you.
Oh, 2,100 PSI is their stated operating pressure. 20 seconds to close the 6-inch valve. 25, 30 seconds. The reporting time, you have to factor in how many seconds before it takes that valve to register that decrease in pressure. Then go into that system and say we have a release, and that, probably maybe a minute, realistically, something like that.
It depends on the rupture size.
Yeah, so go pop a hole in your tire at 40 PSI, see how fast that air comes out, and multiply that by 200, and that's,
Time's up.
yeah.
Hold your breath.
Is there any horizontal boring in this construction?
Like horizontal directional drilling. Yeah.
So you're pulling pipe through the ground? Okay. Well, for people that do not know what that is, while you're watching, you can watch it when they put in fiber optic cable. You use a weld, you push a pipe through the ground, then you grab a hold of another pipe, you pull it back through the ground like that. Every one of those welds, every weld I've ever made in my life will fail. Every pipe fails. It's a fact of life, no matter what ferrous metal you use, whatever. When you do that, no matter what coating you have, you stress those welds because it's pulling through the ground like this. I would, just saying what it is.
Horizontal directional drilling is standard practice in the pipeline industry.
It absolutely is.
We use heavier wall pipe. We also use an additional coating, and
Yep.
we will hydro test the pipe both before
Exactly.
we drill it as well as in the final hydro test.
Absolutely, as you totally should. And just like the Kalamazoo, just like Enbridge did under the Kalamazoo River up in Michigan, right before it blew out, 1 million gallons of oil. Exactly the same horizontal boring technique, welding specifications, the safety regulation, all that stuff. They operate in the same, every pipe fails. That's the point. That's just the point of what it making. And you have such a substantial safety department in your corporation because of the nature of your business is very, very, very dangerous. I mean, it's extremely volatile. People, you can't breathe CO2, it'll kill you. But if it doesn't kill you, it'll still give you brain damage, make you sick for the rest of your life. So all those people that got released from wherever, from the hospital, they look at you and they go, oh, you're fine, and go home. And you have chronic brain injury. You have a traumatic brain injury for the rest of your life. Just a statement. Oh, I did have another question. How long does it take for CO2 to turn to, I assume you're talking about calcium carbonate? When carbon turns, how many years does that take?
Yeah, existing in the wells is standard solution. And then it will take thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
Yeah.
And there is really no way to verify if that carbon stays in those wells.
We will have monitoring systems on all edges of the sequestration sites.
And again, if you go out of business in the future,
There are
who monitors those
regulations
wells?
in North Dakota, I'm less specific with them as the Iowa project manager, that have their durations regardless. Once you start sequestering, that you have to do.
And actually, in North Dakota, so they welcome these projects, they're doing it today, it's not, like I said, it's not new there. I don't know the exact years, I want to say maybe 10 years, but after a certain length of time, the state of North Dakota actually assumes liability for the sequester area. I don't know, like, I don't know the exact term, but that's.
Happily, I'm sure they would happily assume that because they're sitting on the largest reserve of sweet crude in the world. If they're in the bit of the stars, they're in that Bismarck shale field. Those pipes run both directions. So when you guys go out of business, I'm sure they'd happily say, thank you for building us an infrastructure that we can now export our material through, you know. I'd happily assume the responsibility.
Just to be really specific though, our easements in our permits are specific to a product. So CO2.
CO2 only.
That's specific, the easements are specific and the permits in which we seek are specific.
So CO2 is not right now being pumped through Illinois back into old injection wells to help remove more oil from dried wells? Is that all?
There are different CO2 projects I believe, in Illinois, North Dakota, maybe even some in the South that do injection for oil recovery.
It's another use for that product to liquefy stuck oil in geological formations, liquid CO2, right? Yeah,
Enhanced oil recovery.
Enhanced oil recovery is a potential use for your product, right? Or no?
EOR does use CO2, but the agreements and every conversation we've had with our ethanol plants is their desire is to permanently sequester their CO2.
Desire.
But that's not up to them. Once it becomes your product, then it's up to Summit to decide what's done with it.
No, I'm not exactly familiar, but my understanding is we're shipping it for them. And the only reason they want to do it is to lower the carbon intensity score, which requires permanent sequestration for the rates that they want.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you all.
Just gonna do a quick little housekeeping thing. We're gonna do these last three people, and then I'm gonna declare the meeting complete to allow you guys to begin talking with Summit. So we'll go through these three people, and then we'll declare the meeting complete, and you guys start talking. So just letting everybody know.
I'll be quick, but he just brought up something that occurred to me. Isn't one of your big investors Mr. Ham, who does the oil? So why would he be investing in Summit to sequester CO2 and not for an EOR?
Yeah, great question. I don't want to speak for him, but generally speaking, the oil industry and the ethanol industry used to be at odds. They're now working hand in hand to keep the liquid fuel economy competitive. So
for more for the oil, just to keep away from electric. Kind of. Okay, you answered it, thank you. And then Kylie, I just wanted to verify with you, did you say there was gonna be a staff member at every ethanol plant along the route?
Yeah, someone will man the capture equipment.
Okay, so are they gonna be working for the ethanol plant, or they're just gonna be just doing the capture
There'll
facility?
be some carbon solutions in place.
Oh, okay, and every one of them. Okay, thank you.
My inquiry goes back to the promise to use local unions in the state. Do you guys know how local unions work? The national unions? I used to work through the Boilermaker Union out in California, Nevada, and Las Vegas. I built power plants. I installed fitted and welded pipelines up to a 12-foot diameter. Did stainless, carbon. The Boilermakers, and all unions, pipe fitter union, labor unions, they don't use necessarily local labor. They pull employees from other states. It's not all local labor. So it won't be our local people hired to work in Montgomery County. It'll be somebody from Texas, somebody from California. If you don't know this, this is how it works. I did it for years. Just thought everybody in here should know that.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Susie McDonald.
Susie, get a little closer.
Okay. We are affected on your north-south route. IUB has already granted you permission to steal our land from us, which is basically what you're doing. We didn't want your pipeline. We told your land agents we didn't want it. We don't want any part of you. But yet, we had to make several trips to the Capitol, our Board of Supervisors meetings. We had to defend why we didn't want you on our land. But you didn't have to do anything. You guys just come, oh, we want your land. But, so basically, you are coming for everybody's land. Because if they don't want you on it, eminent domain is on the tail end. So you, Summit Carbon Solutions, okay, I married a farmer. I'm gonna try not to get emotional, but you guys do not care about what our plans were. Plain, pure, and simple. We don't want you on our land. We don't want your money. We don't want any part of it, but yet you are forcing us to take it. So I want you guys to explain to me why we had to go defend our land and why we didn't want you on our land. We want no part of your pipeline project. What gives you the right to take it from me?
I don't know your specific property. I'd be happy to go with you after the meeting and look at it. I don't know what the options are. What I do know is we are doing everything we can to work with landowners. That's what JD and those teams do all the time.
We don't want your land. We don't want your pipeline,
And
sir.
I don't know, like I said, I don't know your specific property. I can't speak to it. I can say generally speaking, that's what we're always trying to do. And then, so like I said, I don't know that I think, I just want to clarify, well, I'm not gonna get in the weeds on it, but you retain the property. We are putting a 50-foot easement on the property.
But you're taking my freedom away forever. Forever. You're taking our right away from us to do what we want on our land, when we want, how we want. Once your pipeline goes in, it diminishes what we can do on our land. Thank you. So that brings me to my next point, okay? Have you met with our Montgomery County supervisors about the plume modeling?
I believe some of them, yes.
Okay, so they're not gonna be the ones farming, okay? Just like every other, lots of people in here are family and generational farmers. So it'll be grandfathers, fathers, sons, grandsons, granddaughters, whatever the situation may be. So in my particular situation, we have one son, okay? We're a family operation. When it's harvest time, we all go out. My son does the combine, I drive a cart, my husband drives a cart. You're not putting an odorant in this. Okay? So what happens if there happens to be a breach? We don't know, and we're out there doing our family operation. Who's coming for us? I want to know. Which one of you are coming for us?
I guess first to clarify, there'll be indicators in terms of fertilization of the CO2 as well as a loud noise. But we will have a detailed emergency response plan with the county in place.
Why don't you tell them about the shrapnel? When the pipeline explodes, it's gonna kill us.
It'll unzip.
Folks, listen, we respect your opinion. One of the things we have to do is we have to talk about hypothetical versus real life situations.
Okay.
And what the facts are on safety is topmost importance to us. Number
Safety,
two,
yeah.
there's
Okay,
never-
any county that comes in here and tries to protect the citizens, you sue them. How is that trying to protect us? You sue them for trying to protect the citizens of the county when they try to get an ordinance.
So, so folks.
And you are a liar. Because you came out and said you tried to talk to the last 7 people of the first section. You didn't talk to me. I'm on the last 7.
We got a letter. Yeah.
So, just to be very clear, on safety, it is our top priority as our company. Secondly, with regards to pipeline safety, we follow federal and state regulations.
And what are those regulations made for? What are those regulations made for this pipeline? That was made for propane pipelines. It wasn't made for carbon pipelines. You won't wait for the FEMA regulations.
You cover CO2 pipelines today, regulations.
Really? Why hasn't it been released yet? It won't come out to the fall, she said.
195. Covers CO2 pipelines today, and for the 5,300 miles that are in operation today.
Okay, so what I still don't understand is why our elected or board of supervisors has information regarding the flume modeling, but the farmers who are gonna be working the fields, we're not privy to that. Why?
We're the
ones that are gonna be working, we're gonna be planting, we're gonna be harvesting, all of that. Why are the people that are impacted, why are we not informed about what we're dealing with?
And we're paying for the tax credits.
Part of the regulations that we have to follow are emergency response and public awareness.
Okay. Okay, so.
Dispersion modeling informs our public awareness program and our emergency response plan, along with our integrity management plans to keep the pipeline safe. Those things in the public awareness program will be communicated to the public.
So release the flume modeling. So we know what we have to face. Would you be willing to farm over the top of it?
I'm
You're
not
not
a farmer.
you're not even gonna put this down below the frost line. Are you willing to put it down 8 feet deep to keep us safe?
Again, we've done frost heat studies, and we're also using the examples of the millions of miles of pipeline in the country, as well as plenty in colder climates than Iowa, on how things that are not stainless steel, carbon steel will react to frozen ground.
What's the frost line in Iowa? What a bad year.
I do not know off the top of my head.
It figures, and you're putting it in the pipeline. And you're putting it in 4 feet, 56 inches. You're a little too shallow. It'll keep up out of the ground, it'll break.
So, as you said earlier, sir, nothing is forever. Okay? Nothing lasts. We're not promised tomorrow. We're not promised when we leave here. So, there is a chance that something can happen and something can rupture. So, what about the folks that are just out for a Sunday drive? And there's a pipeline breach. And they don't know it. It's odorless. It's colorless. In Mississippi, the odorant was put in there. That's how folks knew. They smelled something. So how is that different than up here?
There wasn't an odorant in the pipeline in Mississippi. There
Okay.
was a chemical called hydrogen sulfide, which is a deadly toxic gas that was in that pipeline as well as the CO2.
Okay, so how come we're not gonna do it up here for us then, so that we can be aware if there is a breach? Somebody said that they
Our
smell rotten
CO2
eggs.
is approximately 98% pure. Rotten eggs is the smell of hydrogen sulfide, which is a deadly toxic gas that is naturally occurring in naturally occurring CO2. Our CO2 is not, we do not want to put hydrogen sulfide in our pipeline. It is a huge hazard and risk.
Okay. So again, you folks are sitting up here that you want, friendly, you wanna work with landowners, but the landowners that don't want the pipeline, it's gonna be eminent domain, because you've already been granted the eminent domain. So eminent domain is on the tail end of your pipeline, no matter what. Thank you.
So I know the line is formed, I'm going to stop it right there, that lady. Sorry, I forgot your name. You three will be able to continue to ask your questions, but I'm going to declare the meeting complete, so you can come and ask Summit.
They're gonna give up their land. Why don't you let them talk?
Sir, they're gonna be allowed to talk with Summit after I get done saying this, okay? Summit's conference personnel will still be here, land agents will be in the back, they come up here and talk to Mr. Kestner and all these people. So, as landowners, you have the right to ask Summit Carbon to address your concerns or changes to the route or make other changes. The negotiation process is the time to request such changes or to address any concerns you might have. It's usually helpful to be very specific with your concerns. The requirements of Iowa Code Chapter 479 is satisfied with the presentation and discussion completed herein. Some Carbon Solutions as CS Carbon may now begin negotiations with landowners for easements in this county, easements or other property interests in this county. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
But I can still ask a question. Oh. Well, then the people can't hear me.
You have to go up.
Okay, you guys, since I have to ask you without the microphone and the meeting's over, I still want to ask you. That last night I asked about, it's off.
It's probably not on.
Yes.
I'm sure they turned it off.
Is it off for a reason?
It's off. I'm sure they turned it off back there.
$85 per pound or $85?
Talk to the advocate.
If you can't put an odorant in the stuff, like you guys told me last night, because it's corrosive.